Jake had spent years imagining this moment. The dream of having a backyard pool, his personal oasis, had fueled his late nights and weekend plans for months. After endless meetings with contractors, meticulous design sketches, and hours spent obsessing over the right materials, he was finally ready. The permits were approved, the plans were set, and the backyard that had once been a mundane stretch of grass would soon transform into a shimmering retreat, with waterfalls and crystal-clear waters. It was going to be perfect. But as Jake watched the first shovel full of earth being scooped from the ground, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His quiet suburban neighborhood was supposed to be a place of peace, a place where neighbors knew each other's names, and the biggest concern was whose lawn had the greener grass. But in every corner of the block, there were whispers, subtle, almost imperceptible glances exchanged behind closed curtains. No one was bold enough to say it, but the truth was clear. Karen, the self-appointed neighborhood watchdog, was always watching. Jake had heard stories about Karen long before he moved in. She was the one who documented every infraction, who called out the neighbor for leaving their trash bins out too long, who insisted on enforcing the most arcane and ridiculous rules dictated by the HOA. But he didn't mind. He thought he could avoid the inevitable confrontation by simply being polite and following the rules. His pool, after all, was within the HOA guidelines. He'd made sure of it. What could go wrong? But the moment he submitted his pool plans, it was as if the entire neighborhood held its breath. The first letter from the HOA arrived just a week after construction began. It was full of formalities, complaints about excessive noise, and unapproved construction methods. Jake stared at the paper in disbelief. He had followed every rule to the letter. And then there was the mention of Karen's concerns. That's when Jake first realized this wasn't just about the pool. This was personal. The following day, Karen appeared at his door, clipboard in hand, looking every bit the self-righteous neighborhood enforcer. Her eyes were narrow, lips curled into a tight smile, as though savoring the moment. "Jake," she said, her tone dripping with a mix of condescension and authority, "I've come to discuss your pool." She wasn't asking, she was informing. It was clear she already believed the matter was settled in her mind. Jake tried to keep his composure. "I'm following all the rules, Karen. There shouldn't be an issue." "Oh, there's an issue, all right," she replied, her voice like cold steel. "I'm afraid the noise is disruptive, and I've noticed some unapproved changes to your design. I'll be reporting this to the HOA board." Jake's pulse quickened, but he forced a smile. "If you're concerned, I'll be happy to have the HOA review everything. But I'm sure it's all fine." Her eyes lingered for a moment too long before she turned and walked away without another word. Jake stood there, staring after her, the door still ajar. Something about the interaction gnawed at him. Karen's coldness, the way she held that clipboard like it was a weapon, her certainty that she was in control. It was like she already knew she would win, no matter what. What Jake didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. The feeling of dread that had settled in his chest was justified. Karen wasn't just going to stand by and watch. She was going to make sure that his dream pool would never see completion. The days following Karen's visit were a blur of anxiety and confusion. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every time he heard the hum of the machinery or the clink of tools in the backyard, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. It was as if Karen's disapproving presence had cast a shadow over his once peaceful plans. The whole neighborhood seemed to be watching now, eyes peering out from behind curtains, whispering behind closed doors. He tried to keep his focus. The pool was nearly finished. The deep end was shaping up nicely, and the tiles along the edge gleamed in the afternoon sun. Jake had poured his heart and soul into this project. He imagined summer nights spent lounging by the water, the laughter of friends echoing in the cool evening air. It was supposed to be perfect. But then, one evening, he came home to find the worst kind of surprise. Jake parked his car in the driveway, exhausted from a long day at work, eager to check on the pool's progress. The house was quiet. a little too quiet. He pushed open the backyard gate, and then he saw it. The water level in the pool had dropped. Not just a little, a significant amount. It was almost as if someone had drained it. His heart sank. The pool's filtration system was running, its pump humming in the background, but something was off. The sparkling blue water, once inviting, now looked murky, the bottom littered with strange debris. Did a pipe burst? Jake muttered to himself, rushing toward the pool's filtration area. He crouched beside it, his hands trembling as he inspected the system. The pipes were intact. The connections seemed fine. But something wasn't right. A faint smell of chlorine lingered in the air, and he realized someone had tampered with it. The filter housing was cracked, the parts disassembled, and worst of all, several crucial valves had been deliberately loosened. Someone had sabotaged his pool. Jake's mind raced. Was it vandalism? The neighborhood kids had been known to cause trouble, but this wasn't the work of a few pranksters. This was calculated, deliberate, and precise. He scanned the area for any sign of the culprit, footprints in the dirt, any tool carelessly left behind, but found nothing. It was as if the person responsible had vanished into thin air. The first thought that crossed his mind was Karen. It was too perfect, too convenient. The woman had a vendetta against him, and he had no doubt that she'd be the one to go this far. But how had she done it? He hadn't seen her anywhere near the pool, and there were no signs of forced entry. Had she somehow used her HOA influence to get access? Jake's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just petty revenge. It was a blatant attack on his property, his safety. His pool wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. It was a target. And now he had to find out who was behind it before his dream was shattered for good. He couldn't let this slide. He marched to the front door and grabbed his phone, scrolling through his security camera feed, praying for a clue. It took a few minutes for him to find something. A shadowy figure appeared at the edge of the frame just after dark. The footage was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. The figure was tall, wearing dark clothes, and moved with an eerie calmness as they circled the pool area. Jake's stomach churned. That posture, the purposeful steps, the deliberate way the figure approached the filtration system. It all pointed to one person, Karen. But there was no way to be sure. The footage was unclear, and she was wearing a hood, making her identity impossible to confirm. For a brief moment, Jake considered confronting her again, but he knew better. The stakes were too high now. He needed more evidence. The situation had escalated from a simple neighborhood disagreement to something much darker. Someone had crossed a line, and Jake knew there was no going back. But the question lingered in his mind as he stood there, watching the video. Was Karen truly the one behind this, or had he misjudged her? The truth seemed to slip further away, slipping through his fingers like the water in his pool. And that, Jake realized, was exactly what made this so dangerous. Because Karen wasn't just a busybody. She was playing a game, and Jake had only just walked into her trap. The feeling of unease gnawed at Jake, a constant buzz in the back of his mind. Every day, as he walked past his pool, the damage became more undeniable. He could barely look at the thing without a sense of dread sinking deep in his chest. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It was about control, power, and the chilling realization that his dream had turned into a nightmare. Jake knew he needed help, but where could he turn? The HOA had already shown they were no ally. The board, with its carefully composed faces, had barely acknowledged his complaints. It had become clear that Karen, with her uncanny ability to manipulate, had her claws deep within the HOA structure. He couldn't rely on them anymore. He needed to dig deeper, to find someone who understood the darker side of this neighborhood. That's when he thought of Mrs. Harper. Mrs. Harper lived next door to him, a quiet, elderly woman who had been in the neighborhood long before Jake moved in. She kept to herself mostly, a bit of a recluse, but Jake had often stopped by to chat. She always had a sharp eye for details, a knack for noticing the smallest changes in the neighborhood, things that others might miss. So, one evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon, Jake knocked on her door. The creak of the wooden frame echoed through the still night air as Mrs. Harper opened it just a crack. "Evening, Mrs. Harper," Jake greeted her, trying to sound casual, though his voice betrayed his anxiety. She looked him up and down, her sharp eyes scanning his face as if she could read every unspoken word. "Jake, dear," she said slowly, her voice gravelly, "I thought I'd be seeing you soon." Jake was taken aback. "You knew. People in this neighborhood don't keep secrets long," Mrs. Harper replied, her gaze shifting to the yard, her eyes narrowing. "I've seen her watching, lurking around your property." Jake's heart skipped. "You think it's Karen?" Mrs. Harper's lips curled into a knowing smile. "I don't just think it. I know it. And more than that, I know she's not alone. She's got some help." Jake's pulse quickened. "Help? Who?" Mrs. Harper leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "You don't want to know, Jake. You think it's just her, but she's got her hooks deep in this neighborhood. People have been covering for her for years. The HOA board. They've turned a blind eye to her actions. They like her there. But it goes beyond that. Some of the people you least expect. They'll turn on you the moment you try to stand in her way." Jake felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He'd suspected something darker was at play, but hearing it out loud made it all too real. He had never imagined Karen's influence could reach so far. He had thought this was just a personal vendetta, her obsession with control over the neighborhood. But now, it seemed like a much bigger game, a game with far higher stakes. Mrs. Harper took a deep breath and continued, "I don't have much left to give, but I've seen things. Karen's been after you from the start. Not just because of the pool. Oh no, it's about something more. She's worried you're going to rock the boat. And she'll do anything to stop that." Jake's thoughts spun wildly. What did she mean? What had Karen been hiding? His gut told him that this wasn't just about petty rules anymore. It was personal. But why? Suddenly, Mrs. Harper's expression shifted, and she looked over her shoulder, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. She quickly scribbled something on a piece of paper and handed it to Jake. "Get this checked out," she said, her voice low. "If you want to stop her, this might be the key." Jake stared at the scrap of paper in his hand, the words barely legible in the dim light. "What is this?" "A name," she whispered. "A name that could unravel Karen's little empire." Jake's heart raced. A name. Who could be behind Karen? Who was pulling the strings? Before he could ask more, Mrs. Harper stepped back into the shadows of her home, the door closing with a soft thud. Jake was left standing there, his mind a whirlwind of questions, the paper burning in his hand. As he turned to leave, a cold wind swept through the yard, making the trees shake and rustle ominously. But Jake's thoughts were only on one thing now: the name. Whoever it was, this person could be the key to ending Karen's reign of terror. But he had no idea just how dangerous that name might be, or how deeply it would pull him into the heart of a conspiracy far darker than he ever could have imagined. Jake's mind raced as he walked back to his house, the crumpled piece of paper from Mrs. Harper clenched tightly in his hand. The name written on it was barely legible, the ink smudged and faded, but Jake could make out the words. Oliver Grayson. The name meant nothing to him, but Mrs. Harper had been so insistent. There was something about this name that she believed could bring Karen's empire crashing down. He had no time to waste. As the evening shadows lengthened, Jake sat at his kitchen table, trying to decipher the next move. Who was Oliver Grayson? The name didn't appear to be connected to anyone in the neighborhood, at least not on the surface. But if he was truly part of the network Karen had woven into the HOA, then digging deeper might uncover something that could turn the tables. But something about the situation felt off. The sense of urgency, the pressure to act quickly, everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. Jake was no longer just dealing with petty neighborhood politics. This was a full-blown conspiracy, and he was caught in its tangled web. He decided to act immediately. If Karen and her allies were operating in the shadows, he needed to confront them, to draw them out into the light. That night, Jake waited until the neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, and then slipped into the darkness. The cool night air rustled the trees, but there was no mistaking the purpose in Jake's steps. He was going to confront Karen. He crept past his own backyard, staying low, and moved toward the house across the street, the one where Karen lived. The neighborhood, always so peaceful by day, felt unnervingly still under the cover of night. The streetlights cast long shadows, and every creak of the wind or rustle of leaves seemed amplified in the silence. The closer he got to Karen's house, the heavier his heart pounded. Jake had never thought he'd be sneaking around his own neighborhood, but tonight, that's exactly what he was doing. His palms were slick with sweat as he approached the fence that separated their yards. He had to find out what Karen was hiding, who Oliver Grayson was, and what role Karen played in this entire mess. Jake peered through the fence, squinting in the dim light. He could make out a figure moving inside the house, the faint silhouette of someone pacing. Was it Karen? He couldn't tell. His breath caught in his throat as he watched, waiting for the right moment to make his move. And then, just as he began to turn away, something stopped him dead in his tracks. A sudden flash of movement. Someone was outside. Karen. No, the figure wasn't her. It was a man, tall and deliberate in his movements, his face obscured by a hood. Jake's instincts screamed at him to run, but he was already too far in. He ducked behind the bushes just as the figure stepped closer to the fence, stopping just inches away from where Jake was hiding. The man stood there, motionless, as if listening for something. Jake's breath hitched in his throat, trying to remain as still as possible. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. The man turned, and in that moment, Jake recognized him. Oliver Grayson. The name Mrs. Harper had given him. His heart pounded harder now, his pulse racing in his ears. Oliver's presence here confirmed it. He was part of whatever twisted game Karen was playing. But why was he here, in the dead of night? Before Jake could process what was happening, the man turned and walked toward the back of Karen's house, disappearing into the darkness. A chill ran down Jake's spine. Was Karen and Oliver working together? Were there others involved? With his mind spinning, Jake knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had to confront Karen. He couldn't let her think she could control the entire neighborhood. But just as he prepared to make his move, the sound of footsteps approaching from behind caught him off guard. His eyes widened in terror. Someone was coming. He spun around, adrenaline surging, and found himself face to face with none other than Karen herself. Her eyes gleamed with an icy knowing look, and her lips curled into a smile that sent a shiver down his spine. "So, Jake," she said in a voice dripping with mock sweetness, "I see you've been doing some late-night investigating." Jake's throat went dry. He was caught. There was no escape now. Climax. "What do you think you found?" Karen's voice was calm, too calm, as if she had been expecting this. "Are you really ready to take this to the next level? Are you sure you want to know the truth?" Jake's mind reeled. He was standing at the precipice of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. And the moment of truth was fast approaching. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. Karen was standing just inches away, her eyes locked onto his with a cold, predatory stare. The quiet suburban night seemed to hold its breath, the stillness suffocating, broken only by the sound of Jake's own quickened breaths. Every muscle in his body screamed to run, to escape, but he was rooted to the spot. "You're in over your head, Jake." Karen's voice was smooth, like honey, sweet but poisonous. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." Jake's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I'm not going to stand by while you sabotage my life. You've been destroying everything. My pool, my peace of mind. Why?" Karen's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Jake, You think it's just about the pool. You think this is all some petty neighborhood dispute." She paused, her gaze piercing him. "No, it's much bigger than that. Much bigger than you even realize." Jake's stomach tightened. He had suspected as much. There had to be more to it than just her dislike for his pool. "Then tell me," he challenged, his voice shaking, but he held his ground. "What's it really about?" Karen stepped closer, her shoes scraping softly against the gravel as she crossed the yard. The moonlight cast sharp shadows over her face, making her features appear even more menacing. She was enjoying this, every second of it. "Let's just say," Karen continued, her tone suddenly taking on a dark, almost conspiratorial edge, "that you've been a thorn in the side of something far bigger than you think." She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a suffocating fog. "I've been protecting this neighborhood, Jake. You're a threat to that. And people like you. Well, people like you have a way of upsetting the balance." Jake's mind spun. "What balance? What the hell are you talking about?" Karen laughed, a sharp, dry sound that made the hairs on the back of Jake's neck stand on end. "You really don't get it, do you? You think you're just some innocent guy trying to build a pool. But your little backyard project, your desire to change things, that's what got you noticed." Her words hit Jake like a slap. "Noticed by who?" "By them," Karen replied cryptically. She turned away from him, walking toward the edge of the yard. "By the people pulling the strings behind the scenes. You weren't supposed to be here. You weren't supposed to disturb the order. And now," she trailed off, almost as if savoring the moment, "now you've become a problem that needs to be dealt with." Jake's mind raced as he processed her words. Who were these people? What did she mean by order? Had he truly stumbled into something far darker than he had ever imagined? He stepped forward, urgency in his voice. "What's going on, Karen? What have you been hiding? What's all this about?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to face him again, her eyes cold and calculating. "Let's just say there are certain people who don't like change, Jake. They don't like disruptions to their carefully constructed world. And you." She pointed a finger at him, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You've just disrupted it." Jake felt a chill creep down his spine. The pieces were slowly starting to fall into place, but there was still so much he didn't understand. Who was she working for? What was she protecting? Before he could press her for more answers, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, faint, but unmistakable. Someone else was coming. Jake's pulse spiked. Karen's eyes darted toward the sound, and for the briefest moment, a flicker of panic crossed her face. It was gone as quickly as it came, but Jake had seen it. She wasn't as confident as she had appeared moments before. "Looks like our little conversation will have to wait," Karen said, her voice suddenly sharp. "You're not safe here anymore, Jake. You never were." She turned and walked quickly toward the back of the house, disappearing into the shadows. Jake stood there for a moment, frozen, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The sudden realization hit him hard. Karen was part of something much larger, something dangerous, and now he was in the middle of it. The footsteps grew louder, and Jake spun around just in time to see a figure stepping out of the shadows. It was Oliver Grayson. His face was no longer obscured by a hood, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. The man's steely eyes locked onto his, full of something, calculating, dangerous. "You should have stayed away," Oliver said, his voice cold and menacing. Jake's heart raced as the truth crashed down on him. He was now standing in the middle of something far darker than he could have ever imagined, and the consequences of his curiosity were just beginning. The air around Jake felt suffocating as Oliver Grayson took another step closer, his eyes fixed on him like a predator closing in on prey. Every instinct in Jake screamed at him to run, to escape, but his feet felt glued to the ground. The situation had escalated beyond his control. He was caught in something much darker, much bigger than he had ever imagined. Oliver's voice was low, almost too calm, as he took another step forward. "You should have listened, Jake. This isn't a fight you can win. There are forces at work here that you can't even begin to comprehend." Jake tried to steady his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "I don't care about your forces," he snapped, his voice more defiant than he felt. "I care about the truth. What are you and Karen really up to? What is all this about?" Oliver's lips twitched into something resembling a smile, but it was far from comforting. "You really think it's about a pool, don't you?" He let the question hang in the air for a moment, watching Jake's reaction with cruel amusement. "You're not just some innocent guy with a dream of a backyard oasis. You've stirred the pot, Jake. You've exposed things that should never have seen the light of day." Jake felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This was no longer about petty sabotage. No, this was something far more dangerous, something that had been hidden in plain sight. He had unknowingly become a part of something that threatened everything he knew. "What have I exposed?" Jake's voice was shaky, but he tried to stand his ground. "I don't care about your little games anymore. I just want the truth." Oliver's eyes glinted with something dark, something unsettling. "The truth, Jake," he mused, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "The truth is, you've been walking around with blinders on. You've been staring at your pool, thinking that was the problem. But you're only seeing the surface." Jake felt his stomach twist. "What do you mean?" Oliver stepped closer, his breath warm on Jake's skin as he whispered, "Karen's been running the HOA for years, yes. But she's been running something else too. Something that goes far beyond the neighborhood." He paused, letting the words sink in. "She's protecting something, something dangerous. And by poking around in her business, you've put yourself directly in her crosshairs." Jake's mind raced. What could Karen be hiding? What was she protecting? Before he could ask more, Oliver continued, his voice cold and menacing. "There are people who don't take kindly to their plans being disrupted, Jake. You think Karen's the real threat. She's just a pawn. And now that you've got their attention, you've become part of a much larger game." Jake's blood ran cold. "What are you saying? Who are these people? What do they want from me?" Oliver's smile widened, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly how the game was played. "That's the question, isn't it?" he replied. "You'll find out soon enough. But by the time you do, it'll be too late." Suddenly, the distant sound of a car engine cut through the tension like a knife. Both men turned their heads toward the street, where headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the quiet neighborhood. Jake's heart skipped a beat. Was this the backup Karen had called in? Were they about to be surrounded? Oliver didn't seem concerned. He straightened up, taking a step back and folding his arms across his chest. "Looks like our little chat is over, Jake. You'll want to leave before things get complicated." Jake's instincts screamed at him to flee, but his feet were rooted to the ground. His mind was still reeling from what Oliver had said. Karen was part of something much bigger than he had ever suspected. But as the car drew closer, Jake had a sudden, horrifying realization. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute. This was a calculated power play, a conspiracy that reached far beyond the HOA, beyond even Karen. And now, Jake was in too deep. There was no way out, not without uncovering the full extent of the dark forces at play. As the car stopped a few feet away, the doors opened. Two figures stepped out. One was familiar, the other a complete stranger. But what caught Jake's attention more than anything was the look in the eyes of the newcomer, cold, hard, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Get in the car, Jake." Oliver's voice sliced through the tension like a whip. "You don't have a choice anymore." The stranger took a step forward, his posture tense, like a wolf waiting for a command. Jake felt his stomach drop to his knees. This was it. He was caught. But as the seconds ticked by, his survival instincts kicked in. He had to play it smart, get to the bottom of this before he became another pawn in someone else's game. He looked from Oliver to the stranger, his mind racing. There was no more running, No more hiding. It was time to uncover the truth. But as the car's headlights bathed the street in harsh light, Jake realized with chilling clarity, he was no longer just fighting for his pool. He was fighting for his life. The stranger's gaze was unblinking, a predator sizing up its prey. Jake's mind was a whirlwind of fear and adrenaline, but his instincts kicked in. He had to think, and think fast. The headlights of the car bathed the scene in stark light, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to stretch toward him like fingers reaching out to grab him. "Get in the car, Jake." Oliver's voice was sharp, commanding, his tone leaving no room for argument. Now, Jake's heart pounded in his chest, each beat louder than the last. He glanced toward the house, the dim light from the kitchen window still flickering in the background. Was there anyone in the house? Had Karen left? What were they planning to do with him? The stranger took a step forward, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Jake's gaze flickered to the man's cold eyes, the expression on his face unreadable, but it was clear that there was no negotiation here. Jake was not in control anymore. "You can't make me go with you." Jake found his voice. Though it was shaky, the words fighting to escape. His mind screamed at him to run, but the looming figures ahead of him felt like a wall he couldn't climb. Oliver let out a soft chuckle, a sound that sent a chill down Jake's spine. "Oh, Jake, you still don't get it, do you? This was never a choice. You were always going to be a part of this, one way or another." The stranger moved even closer, his steps deliberate, and Jake's pulse quickened. He could almost feel the air shift, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The man's presence was suffocating, like a predator inching in for the kill. Jake stepped back instinctively, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. The driveway stretched out in front of him like an endless path leading toward something unknown, something terrible. His eyes flicked toward the fence, but it was too late. He was surrounded. "Listen," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what you want from me, but I swear, I'll fight. I won't go with you." Oliver's expression hardened, and for a split second, Jake saw something flash behind his eyes. Something dark, something dangerous. "You're already in it, Jake. We've been watching you. We've been waiting for you to make your move. And now, here you are." The words hit Jake like a slap. Watching him, waiting for him. What the hell was happening? He felt as though the ground was shifting beneath his feet, the very fabric of his reality unraveling before him. Before he could say anything else, the stranger stepped forward again, his hand outstretched. Jake's body tensed, preparing to fight back, to make a break for it. But the man's grip was faster than his reflexes. In a swift motion, he grabbed Jake's arm, his fingers like iron around his wrist. Jake tried to pull away, but it was like trying to break free from a vice. "Let go of me," Jake struggled, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Panic was rising in him like a wave, but he fought it, focusing instead on his growing sense of urgency. He couldn't let them take him. He couldn't let them win. Oliver stepped closer, his face mere inches from Jake's. "You think you're in control, Jake. That's adorable. But now you're part of something you can't even begin to understand. You're tangled in a web, and there's no way out." Jake's heart hammered in his chest as he realized the full extent of the trap he was in. This wasn't just about a neighborhood feud anymore. It was a game of power and manipulation, one that had been played for years. And now he was stuck in the middle of it, with no way to escape. Suddenly, the stranger's grip tightened, dragging Jake toward the car with an unsettling calmness. The door swung open, and Jake's world tilted on its axis as he was shoved inside. The interior was cold, the silence oppressive. The man slid into the seat beside him, and the door slammed shut with an ominous finality. Jake felt the car's engine rumble to life, the sound vibrating through his chest. The car began to move, its headlights illuminating the road ahead, but Jake's mind was spinning in 1,000 different directions. "Where are you taking me?" he demanded, trying to keep the tremor from his voice. "What is all this?" Oliver didn't respond immediately. The air was thick with anticipation, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the tires on the asphalt. Jake glanced out the window, trying to make sense of his surroundings, but all he saw were empty streets passing by, indistinct shadows in the dark. "You'll find out soon enough," Oliver said, his voice low and smooth. "But by the time you do, it'll be too late." Jake's breath caught in his throat. He was no longer just a man trying to save his backyard. He was in the midst of a conspiracy that reached beyond anything he could have ever imagined. And as the cars sped through the night, Jake realized one thing with terrifying clarity: there was no going back. The game had begun, and now the stakes were higher than his life itself. Jake's heart hammered in his chest, his body tense as the cars sped through the dark streets. The unsettling silence inside the vehicle was suffocating. He tried to fight back, to process what was happening, but everything felt like a blur. Too fast, too much. He had been dragged into something far deeper than he could have ever imagined. And now it was too late to back out. The stranger sat beside him, his eyes fixed straight ahead, as if nothing in the world could face him. Jake, on the other hand, could feel the panic bubbling inside him, threatening to consume him whole. He'd always prided himself on being in control, but now he was a puppet with no strings to cut. Every turn the car took only seemed to draw him further into a nightmare. "Where are we going?" Jake asked, his voice raw with frustration. He needed answers. He needed to understand what was going on before it was too late. Oliver didn't look at him, but his voice was as cold as ever. "You'll see soon enough. Just sit tight." Jake's mind raced. See soon enough. What did that even mean? Where was he being taken? What did these people want with him? The car pulled off the main road and onto a winding, dimly lit street. The houses here were different, older, more secluded. The kind of places where secrets were buried in the walls, where no one cared to ask too many questions. The vehicle slowed to a stop in front of a large, imposing building, its dark windows staring back at Jake like hollow eyes. It was the kind of place you'd only expect to see in spy thrillers or movies about dangerous conspiracies. The building looked abandoned, its exterior worn down, with a heavy iron gate surrounding it. Jake swallowed hard. This was no ordinary building. It felt wrong. The car door clicked open, and the stranger stepped out without a word. Jake didn't move immediately, his body frozen in place. Was this it? Was this the end? Oliver slid out of the car with a quiet, almost bored movement, and as he walked toward the entrance of the building, he called over his shoulder, "You're not getting out of this, Jake. Not now. Not ever." That last part hung in the air like a death sentence. Still, Jake wasn't ready to give in. He slammed the door behind him, his pulse pounding in his ears. The chill of the night air hit his skin, and he felt every muscle in his body scream for release, for freedom. He looked toward the darkened windows of the building. Something inside him told him that whatever lay behind those doors was going to change everything, one way or another. "Get inside," the stranger said flatly, already moving toward the entrance. Jake hesitated, but only for a moment. If he stayed here, if he didn't get answers, the nightmare would continue, the game would go on, and he would never be free. He had to face this, no matter the cost. Inside, the building was eerily quiet. The air smelled of dust and old secrets, and the dim lights flickered above them like the last remnants of a dying hope. The walls were lined with shelves filled with files, endless rows of them, stacked to the ceiling. Each file was labeled with a name, a date, and an ominous number. Jake's eyes widened in disbelief. What is all this? This wasn't just an HOA conspiracy. It was a network, a system, hidden in plain sight, something far larger than anything he had ever imagined. Oliver moved toward one of the desks, his hand skimming over the files with a practiced ease. "You've walked into the heart of it now, Jake," he said, his voice smooth, almost amused. "This is where it all starts. All those little things you never noticed, the stuff that didn't make sense. It's all connected. All of it. Jake stepped forward, his breath catching in his throat. What are you talking about? He was done with the cryptic answers. He needed the truth now. Oliver turned to face him, his eyes cold and calculating. This is bigger than Karen. This is bigger than your pool. This is about control, Jake. Power. The kind of power that makes the world spin. Jake's pulse quickened. He was finally starting to get it, but it was too much to grasp all at once. So, what? You're running a conspiracy to control the neighborhood. The city? The world. Oliver's smile was thin, like a predator toying with its prey. You're not wrong. But you're also not right. It's not about control. It's about elimination. Elimination of anyone who threatens the order, the peace. People like you, Jake, you mess things up. You ask questions. You disrupt. And now we're going to make sure you don't do that again. Jake's blood ran cold. He was caught in a trap, but this was no ordinary trap. These people were ruthless, willing to eliminate anyone who stood in their way. And he had just stumbled into their crosshairs. Before he could say another word, the stranger stepped forward, placing a file on the desk in front of Jake. His name was written on it, but it wasn't his usual name. It was something else, something darker, something that tied him to this world of secrets, of control, of manipulation. Jake's hands trembled as he opened the file, his eyes scanning the contents. What he saw shocked him to his core. His life, the life he thought he knew, was a lie. He wasn't just a victim in this game. He was part of it. The world as he knew it was collapsing around him. And as the realization hit, he understood one thing with terrifying clarity. There was no escape. Not anymore.